Hi, welcome to the show. My name is Brandon Fertig. This is Deeper Inquiry. Today my guest is Brian Gruber. Brian is running for the State House of Representatives. Welcome, Brian Gruber.
Thank you, Brandon. It's good to be here.
All right. So, you're running for House and Senate, House District 68.
It's downtown and uptown and the surrounding neighborhoods.
Okay. That area is typically quite DFL oriented, as it has been the last 30 years. And you're not endorsed by the DFL. Obviously, that's another candidate.
It's an uphill battle.
Yeah.
It's an uphill battle. I think in the last 10 election cycles, it's been about 80% every year for DFL candidates. I'm endorsed by the Republican Party, and I think a lot of what I'm seeing is a lot of people in that area vote DFL, but don't necessarily identify as DFL, just have a poor perception and maybe a misinformed perception about Republicans in the area.
And you assume that perception would be the Republican who likes to start wars and prevent gays
Right.
from marrying.
This is what they've seen from Republican leaders and Republican figures on a state level and on a national level. And that is what they've seen. That's what people have come to know the Republican Party as. Whereas myself and a lot of Republicans in Minneapolis, that doesn't describe us. Like, I just don't see why smart fiscal policy and wanting to reduce spending have to go hand in hand with an intrusive social agenda. They just are two separate issues.
Well, you're an example of someone who says that isn't the case. Indeed, your social issues are more libertarian. Is that how you would describe it?
I think if you're going to describe it anyways, that'd be the most accurate.
Okay.
I think a lot of it is about the proper role of government. If you're dealing with a person's personal, private decisions, the more personal and private those decisions are, the less government should be involved.
So would you say that's a more DFL approach to how they...
No, this is a completely different approach. I think the DFL and the Republicans kind of go at it the same way. They both say it's okay for you to engage in these activities that we approve of, but you cannot do these things which we disapprove of. And both parties approve and disapprove of different things.
Well, that's definitely prevalent with the Republicans. Give me an example of how the DFL lives up to that same restricting stereotype that you're describing.
Well, the DFL, they have a few things of their own where they disapprove of it. For example, they're on the wrong side of a lot of free speech issues, as well as trying to have too much involvement about what can go into food, what can't go into food.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the smaller regulatory...
Yeah, more nanny state stuff.
Exactly. You can do this, you can't do that. So it's both sides.
And you differ from either of those ideologies you purport because you're more of a laissez-faire, just,
Well, the way I see it is...
socially let people do what they want to do.
It's not government's job to approve or disapprove of activities which really don't harm anyone. It's a question about the role of government.
Okay.
So there are definitely things which I disapprove of, but I would never be so presumptuous as to say you can't do that because I disapprove of it.
But now with fiscal issues, there's quite a difference between you and your opponents. Even more drastic differences than the social ones, I would assume.
Right.
And talk about that for a minute or two.
Well, actually, that's very important to me. That's kind of the reason why I got into this. My number one priority will be fixing the budget. We do that by reducing spending.
Okay. That runs contrary to how the government has been run the last 40 years. Are you concerned about flying in the face of tradition, or however you want to put it? The government has been growing 20% every biennial for the last few decades. You want to seek to stop that trend, or cut some things back, reverse some spending, reverse some programs, or what?
Absolutely. We do need to cut spending. We spend $1 billion every year recently that we don't have. We take out debt that our children or our grandchildren will have to pay for. So that's irresponsible. It's unsustainable. It's not something that we should be doing now, and it's not something that we can continue to do into the future.
Well, and so why do you oppose raising taxes to come up with that extra money?
I don't oppose raising tax revenue. I would like to see more taxes collected. but I do oppose raising tax rates.
Okay.
I don't think that's productive. We'll have a higher total revenue from taxes if people are making more money, if people are spending more money, if people can find good, better jobs than they have now, or jobs in the first place.
Okay. And so you don't want to raise the tax rate because then you think that would be a restriction on economic growth?
That would hurt everyone.
Yeah.
I do want to see our taxes lowered.
Mm-hmm.
I like to see the corporate tax lower so that companies who can employ people move to the state and stay in the state.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have companies leaving like has been the trend over the
Mm-hmm.
past 2 years and taking their jobs with them.
So does that, because that's a pretty Republican or conservative argument, do you think that just doesn't resonate very well with the voters of a 60A and that's why they've been voting Democrat heavily the last several decades?
No, I think a lot of it is just the perception of Republicans as wanting to intrude on their rights. I think sensible spending, sensible budget, I think that appeals to a wide base of people.
But why doesn't it come to the forefront of issues in 60A? Because if it did, wouldn't that be something they would be concerned about? Because they haven't, but I mean, they haven't raised that alarm ever that I've been around and you've been around.
That's true. Well, I think part of it is, as I mentioned before, the perception of Republicans. They don't give them a chance. And the candidates that the Republicans have been putting out lately, they've been okay, but they haven't worked hard to spread the message, to make people aware of what's going on in the House of Representatives.
So are you saying that's how you're going to separate yourself from previous Republicans who've ran, and as separate yourself from Republicans, in general, by just working harder and letting them know that, hey, I'm not the same kind of Republican that your dad voted for?
Well, that's the only way that I can win, is if I work hard and get my message out to everybody. I do think my message of creating careers for Minnesotans, of reducing spending, and of protecting your civil liberties, I think that resonates with a lot of people, especially right here in downtown and uptown.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I just need to get that message out to people.
How do you do that?
You knock on a lot of doors.
Yeah.
You knock on a lot of doors. You do things like this.
Have you been doing that?
I've been doing that. Not as much as I'd like to. I've been out just for 2 weekends now.
Okay.
But
And what do people think when you knock on their door? Tell me about some of the receptions you've gotten, because I think a lot of people would be interested in just knowing what's it like running for office.
Most of it, most people are pretty friendly. I haven't had anyone chase me away. Usually, when I tell them, this is who I am, this is what I'm running on, and they hear my mixture of protecting your civil liberties and reducing spending, most people, this is fairly common, say, oh, you're running as an independent. I get that one quite often.
So then they think, oh, independents are cool.
Well, I don't hide the fact that I'm a Republican.
Uh-huh.
I don't hide that fact at all. I don't lead with it, but I don't hide it.
Yeah. And then when they find out you're a Republican, do they kind of sneer or go,
Sometimes they do.
Yeah.
A lot of them, think it's pretty encouraging to see a Republican who doesn't want to bring on an intrusive social agenda. But that's what the Republicans of Minneapolis are. The Republicans.
That's a good point. No, finish your statement.
All right. The Republicans of Minneapolis are considerably different from the Republicans of the suburbs or from outstate.